What's up, everyone? It's Shaff, Clean Shave Shaff, aka That Mill Guy, coming at you with something that has been on my mind for a bit, and primarily it's going to be about a topic of discussion that's been happening on the Mill Discord. Nonetheless, a conversation that has evolved over time in the Discord, primarily as Modern has evolved, as the archetype has evolved with new cards and new challenges and maybe new players entering the foray. And it's a topic that wants to talk about what single card is the card that's going to enter Modern Mill and bring it into the tier 1 minus status. What is it going to be? Is it going to be maybe an instant speed Glimpse the Unthinkable? Is it going to be maybe a payoff as powerful as something like Visions of Beyond? Well, in my opinion, which is why it's been on my mind, I think it is the latter. And before we go right into the card, I think it's important to discuss why I think that and what are some of the other payoffs that are currently in the deck that are pushing the archetype over the edge and giving it the explosiveness that it already has. So generally, I think a lot of Mill players can agree that the current Mill structure is relatively strong. The Mill spells that we have may not be obviously the best in the world. We would hope that many more are instant speed and a little bit more lethal, but they're okay. And I think the payoffs are what we're really lacking. So if you look at maybe a deck like Death's Shadow, they have a card like Stubborn Denial. 1 mana, counter target spell unless, non-creature spell, unless that player plays 1. So really not a card that strikes out to you, but once you get that ferocious kind of clause enabled, then it becomes a negate at instant speed for 1 mana, which is a lot better than 2 mana, and it's very important for a tempo style deck like Death's Shadow. So I would consider a card like Stubborn Denial a very efficient, very powerful payoff for a strategy like that. So more so in the realm of Mill, we can talk about some of the payoffs that we have. So let's get right to it. I want to actually talk about 3 specifically before we go into the one card that I've designed that I think will really help Mill. So the first payoff I want to talk about is going to be Visions of Beyond. Now, somewhere on the screen, I'm going to link it here and down below as well. I've already made a video as a bit of a love letter to Visions of Beyond, as I really do love this card, and I think the saying goes that Ancestral Recall is legal in Modern. You just need to play Mill. This card really speaks for itself in terms of power, a trigger clause that's relatively easy for a Mill player to enable most of the time. Some decks will make you work for it, but generally instant speed, draw 3. Look, every single blue draw spell that's ever existed in Magic generally just wants to try and copy this card, and other than maybe something like Treasure Cruise, really this is as close as it gets, in my books anyway. The next payoff that I want to talk about is going to be something more recent, something that really brought Modern Mill to a head, and in terms of a bit of a renaissance. It's going to be Drown in the Loch, providing a different angle of attack to threats and different spells that your opponents may have. This has been fantastic, just being able to react to permanents such as even Planeswalkers that have been relatively difficult to deal with, but now we can at least deal with them on the stack, or even stay reactive in situations where we may not have a surgical extraction to maybe deal with a problematic card. Instead, we just counter it. Blah, blah, blah. This card is fantastic in all ways, shape, and form. But the final card that's going to help me transition into the card I want to talk about as a payoff, it's going to be Crypt Incursion. Now, this card should, for most Mill players, be relatively self-explanatory. You do not play Mill without this card. This card is the sole reason, in what I would say is the reason why we're actually favored against Dredge. For some of you newer players that may just be joining me with this video and everything, we are heavily favored against Dredge, and I just want you to look at the Dredge creature list, how easy it is for them to put creatures into their graveyard, and then read Crypt Incursion and realize that, yes, Mill is a very easy time with them. And now thinking about even harder matchups such as maybe Modern Humans, we start looking at an archetype where resolving a Crypt Incursion on turns 4, 5, 6 can easily net you upwards of 20, 30, 50, 60 plus life, swinging the game back in your favor and turning that minuscule board, even with maybe a Thalia's Lieutenant or two, into from a lethal board to a 7-turn clock. Yeah, it can be kind of crazy. So let's take this concept and highlight the fact that currently in Modern, Mill really struggles with one broad archetype that can be split into two, and that's the red deck wins broad archetypes. Red decks that are very linear, are very aggressive, and try and get at your face, and that can be split up into Modern Prowess and Modern Burn. Now, Modern Prowess is... I would like to think Modern Prowess is a little bit more favored than Burn, just because if you can keep up with your removal spells, there's a lot of spells that are very suboptimal for them, don't do a lot of damage, or just don't do damage at all. So if you're able to keep their board clear, you should be fine. Whereas Burn will always just kind of top deck that 3 damage burn spell that'll get you to 0. So in order to deal with archetypes like this, I was thinking along the lines of Crypt Incursion, how could we have a payoff that can, of course, be good in Modern, or maybe just not overpowered in Modern, usable, but more specifically designed for Mill. So something like Drown, where you do see it in sometimes maybe the Grixis control list, but you primarily see it in Mill. So here it is, everyone, up on the screen right now. It's going to be called Abandoned Knowledge. Now, of course, I just used a random card generator up on the internet. You can kind of just Google it, put some artwork together. Of course, in the description box down below and on the card, I have a link to the artist that I've taken the lovely art from, and you can go check out their DevianArt. Thank you so much. And this card, I believe this is what's going to work for us here. So 1 black, 1 colorless for a sorcery, which is how I feel like is the big balancing factor. You choose 1. Each player exiles all sorceries from their graveyard or all instants from their graveyard, and then each player gains 2 life for each card exiled that way. Okay, so this is very similar to Crypt Incursion. We lose the instant speed access, but I think generally this effect is really powerful. Now, the sorcery speed is how I want to balance that, but I think we definitely could make it an instant speed effect, and maybe right now at its current design it should be a rare, but I think this really helps primarily Mill. Now, this is maybe a card that you would think the control decks are generally trying to use, but even still, you have to choose one or the other. And if you choose sorcery, a lot of times you're not going to have a lot of sorceries as a control deck yourself that you're going to be able to exile, and the burn player is not really going to have a lot of sorceries that they can exile for you to gain enough life. So you have to choose instants, and as a control deck, that's a real downside for you as well, because you start losing your Snapcaster Mage, Mystic Sanctuary, whatever synergies just to gain a bunch of life from burn. So there is a bit of a balancing factor, but when you're playing Mill, you do not care. I will happily lose all of the instants and sorceries in my graveyard, and of course my burn opponent's graveyard, just to be able to swing myself back up in life. And of course, the other balancing factor is they gain the life as well. But the beauty of this in Mill is that we don't care about our opponent gaining life. So I think this type of card design is actually really interesting. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn here, but I really want people to use this card as a template to maybe think outside the box and look at cards that are going to be coming down the line, potentially in Zendikar Rising, maybe in early 2021, as to cards that can potentially be similarly designed to this, but provide a payoff like Crypt Incursion for instants and sorceries. And I solidly believe that is going to be the card to bring Mill back up, because this is really just going to solidify the red matchups for Mill. This is going to be taking out the majority of a red player's graveyard. Even the prowess decks take out their whole graveyard, deal with their lava darts if they don't have enough mountains to sack to just activate them, whatever it may be. And mill is actually going to be good against those decks. You may want to start considering keeping a lot of your mill spells just to make sure you can fill their graveyard and use a card like this. So let me know what you think about this card. Let me know if maybe this is too overpowered, maybe this is too underpowered, maybe I'm missing something, or what is your idea of a card that you could design that you think maybe will shoot mill up to that tier 1 minus status, whatever it is. Let me know in the comments section down below. But of course, before we head off on this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to the patrons, the individuals that help keep the quality high and the lights on. They help make videos like this possible, and they help, you know, with all the upgrades, with all the equipment around me, of course, all the tech you see around me, the patrons are there. So if you want to see the quality of these videos go up, you want to see more stuff like this, the Patreon is where you can support me, link down below. Now, that's going to be it for the video. Remember, everyone, that even the impossible is possible. And as we ponder that thought and we ponder many other cards in Magic, I hope you'll join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.